You guys have a cheering section.
Yay! Right. This is the Think of Us team. Stand up, you guys. Come on. This is Sixto's team. They're here. They're from Richmond, Virginia. We're going to foster care. We're going to talk a lot about that. They're awesome.
Well, thank you guys for joining us. Welcome back from lunch. I hope everyone had a great lunch. The weather has been amazing, which we've been lucky for. Apparently, they're getting like a foot of snow in New York. So let's be thankful that we're in San Francisco.
I'm from Buffalo, so.
Oh my God, a foot of snow in Buffalo is that's like you don't even like bother to like put on boots for that. So thank you guys for joining me, Sixto and Megan. Megan, you are a former CTO of the United States. You're now running shift7. Sixto, you are the founder and CEO.
Yes.
Of Think of Us, and we're going to talk a little bit about how you guys met each other, how nonprofit startups can leverage and take advantage of people who have vast networks and knowledge and make that marriage work really well. But I thought maybe a great place to start, Sixto, just tell us a little bit about your story and your company for the people who haven't heard of it.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I think it was such a profound moment yesterday when we heard D-Ray talk about those who are closest to the problems is where you can find solutions, right? And so when you look at myself and my team, we experienced the problem that we've been impacted by that problem. We've experienced that problem. So for me, I entered foster care when I was 11 months. By the age of 9, I knew I didn't want to be adopted. I knew I had not found that forever family. But when the judge asked, what do you say, right? And so I was adopted, and it was a pretty abusive and racist adoption. So by 13, I found myself couch surfing. And at 15, after having to record the abuse, tape a tape recorder to my chest, get evidence to prove to the system that this abuse was real, I came back in thinking that the storm was over. This whole 2 years of couch surfing and all the things that had happened came down to this moment where I got back into the system, but it was only the beginning of the next storm, which is to move to multiple places, which was to get ready to be on my own after high school. So at 18, young people all over this country age out. And in some states, it's 21. But what happens is that you take your stuff, in many of these homes, sometimes you don't have luggage, you put it in a trash bag, and you have to figure out where you're going to live, if you're going to school, how you're going to pay for things. And the really screwed up part about all of it is that while you've been in foster care, you have gone from place to place to place. And so the people who you were supposed to connect to no longer are there. And so you end up being 18, 20, with no support system, not a group of people who can act like family in that moment.
That's it. And you were actually in the first class, I think, from Fast Forward, or one of the first classes, with your idea of helping provide services, particularly over digital platforms, to kids, I guess young adults who are leaving the foster care system. Is that right?
We were in the third class.
Okay.
So the third class was 2016. I won't take anything from the first class. I see y'all looking at me. The best class. No, I'm joking. But you know, why Fast Forward was so instrumental to us, when Megan and I met, I had an idea that technology could be the thing that helps young people not only build their personal support system, right? So how can a platform help you build a support system? But then how can you interact with the actual child welfare system in a new way? And so we started to think about how do we redesign the process. Can I get that slide up with the case management process? Nope, that one's not it. We have a bunch of slides. Don't worry, I think we sent version 1. It's fine.
Yeah, but yeah, you guys got to go. Okay. Do you have version 2 or version 1 back there? We'll get some little tech going on.
But I'll talk a little bit about the fact that we built a life coaching platform that is looking to integrate and change the way traditional case management is done. You have the intake process, there's a bunch of assessments, then there's a treatment plan, right? And who asks the young person what is it that they want to do? That doesn't happen. There's no space for that. And so on this journey, I start to talk about what would it do if we put young people at the center? What would it mean if young people can choose their own goals? And that's how I ran into someone crazy enough to actually believe me. We were at an event, and I saw Megan Smith walk in. I didn't know all of what Megan Smith had done, but I knew one thing. She was very important. Because when she walked in, everybody in the room just looked. And I was like, who is this? And the second thing that happened, it was a long line. So I simply went up to Megan. She had her coat in her hand, and so I grabbed her coat and I just waited for the entire line to go, because I figured I want to get to know this person, and obviously everybody's competing for these 5 minutes, so let me just wait. I didn't know it was going to take 45 minutes. You talk to everyone.
Yeah, talk to everyone.
Yeah, and that's how we ended up meeting.
And Megan, so this is while you were CTO, or had you already?
Yeah.
So you're the third chief technology officer under President Obama. You've been at Google. I mean, you're a very powerful, important person. You have all these networks. I'm certain that there's a number of people who asked for your help. Why Sixto? What did you see there that made you say, not only is this worth my time, but I can make a difference here?
Yeah, so a couple different things. One is, so the CTO job is a new job with President Obama. It's now in law. And the idea, it sits with the science advisor in the Office of Science Technology Policy. The job is to help harness the power of data, innovation, and technology on behalf of the American people and the world. It's not the CIO, so it's not IT and those policies. And you're doing a lot of work around policy, like tech policy, things like net neutrality, encryption, open data, those things. We opened 200,000 data sets with the president that really sort of the way your phone is getting you here in geo, but think about that for housing and for education in the house. We did a lot of work on capacity building the government itself, so you see Presidential Innovation Fellows, the U.S. Digital Service, 18F Todd Park built a lot of that with Jen Pelka, who was just here. So getting our government to be as good as Amazon and Facebook and Google and Twitter. Sorry, I'm hitting this. I think stop doing that. And then the third area is how do you capacity build the American people? And I think that, in our Silicon Valley ways, we learn a lot out here about talent and how you fuel talent. The venture capitalists don't make Twitter and Facebook. They find amazing founders and their founding teams and come up underneath them. So when you find an extraordinary founder, right, I'm not going to fix foster care. Sixto is, right? I helped found the Malala Fund. Malala knows way more about how to fix girls and education for children around the world and her family than I do. If we come up underneath them, just like we come up underneath Jeff Bezos and Mark Zuckerberg and others, we can fix a lot of things. In fact, there's not really ever been any other way to do it. Whether it's Clara Barton, Henry Ford, Gandhi, Franklin, George Washington Carver, these are science, social, political, economic entrepreneurs. That's the only way this works. And so you find amazing people who have critical insights and the energy to do it, and you come up underneath them. And it's one of the main things I really am hopeful for with this community, because what's great with Accelerate Good and with all of you is that many of you are in both of these worlds. And I'm hopeful, and we've got some stuff we want to talk to you about, of keeping your tech selves when you move into what we think traditionally is the .org world. Because what we were doing was much more venture catalyzing. And one of the examples, should we show them some of the hackathon stuff? Yeah, okay, so bring up sorry, I'll stop messing up this mic. Okay, so on the foster care hackathon.
Yeah, so one of the things that we started to realize is that technology had such a way to influence frontline practice and redefine the way that we do case management by making sure that you empower the person you're supposed to be saving, right? You're supposed to be coaching, but we do a lot of saving in systems. And so once we started to understand that tech had some type of power here, Molly Dillon at the White House was the other crazy person who believed, because this was early on in our days. And then we said, well, let's have a 2-day hackathon at the White House, but let's design it so that we get new players in the room. We actually foster the different folks across the different industries, and let it not just be about building the coolest new thing and then just leaving it there. So we invited funders to hack, and they had to make a commitment of action. We invited lawyers to hack. We invited the tech community to actually sit down with young people who had experienced foster care. And I'll let you take it from here.
Yeah, and a lot of the community organizations, the whole public sector that works on, there's so many amazing service organizations, and they don't have access to the elite talent. And a lot of times as tech folks, we'd like to work on these problems. But it's a lot easier to make a self-driving car because you don't have to talk with a lot of people. You have to make this thing, and you don't have to go deal with this system that's so heavy and hard to work in. And so it's this cross-functionality. This is one of the teams during the reviews. This is the report out in the White House. Really great cross-functional team. You see Erica Joy Baker, amazing leader, who was at Slack at the time. So just people showed up. We wanted to give you an example A lot of times in government, people will plan an RFP. And then they'll write up everything they need, and someone will procure something that's supposed to be delivered in a bunch of years.
Yep.
And it's a nightmare for making software. Right? Nobody does that. If Jeff Bezos had written an RFP for Amazon, we wouldn't have that. He made books, then CDs, and then he went from there. So you have to do that agilely. So these are some of the examples of the teams. They did kind of a 24-hour hack. This was a group that just noticed that there was a lot of data around. See the challenge list here? So how could you help people with these real challenges and beginning to illuminate resources that are around you using our tools, just like restaurant delivery, right? We know how to make apps like this. Let's make this for this group of people. Here's another one. This one I love. This was a group of presidential innovation fellows trying to make a platform so anyone could volunteer to do tech support work for those who are already providing services, bridging the talent groups. This was one that was working on a digital locker for kids. Because imagine being in this situation, you don't have photographs from when you were a child, you don't have your birth certificate, you don't have your content, you don't have your school records, anything. This is my favorite one. It's not graphically beautiful, it's the lawyers, and we love them, they're text hackers. But they really worked on what it would be like. When do you get lawyers to be able to come together and cross-functionally really hack on what would be a Bill of Rights for children in foster care? Amazing. They're illuminating the problem to us, and then they can go hack on that. Here's one of the Microsoft teams. We had a group come from Romania.
Twilio, Box, they're in the room.
Twilio team, so this is a Microsoft team. So this was locating resources again, and also using chatbots, which you guys ended up picking up some of that. This is also another one looking at resources that kids could have if you're hungry. Could you find someone who has free foods, food kitchen or anything that's within walking distance? We have apps for this stuff. Let's make these kinds of apps. This is incredible. The data is terrible around this sector, right? This group just illuminated the data. Look, there's children in the middle of the Caribbean Sea. Not, right? So let's clean up the data. This other data set where you see the graphics is looking at moving children. So if you're a foster child and you get moved to a different home and somebody doesn't bother to make it near your school, you have to switch schools. This is insane. We can be better at this.
And let me add a little bit to that. I think one of the things that we're looking at and what we're doing differently is trying to make sure that we're getting data generated by the actual young person. When you look at child welfare, it's someone's evaluation, it's a paid professional's assessment of you, it's a self-report. But what happens, like what happened in our platform when we launched in Nebraska, in the first 90 minutes that we launched our life coaching platform, we had 62% of young people create a goal, and they could have created any type of goal, but their goals were around budgets. Their goals were around financial literacy, something around an asset. And so that gave us so much insight to where's the mind frame of a 19-year-old who's aged out of foster care.
So it helps with this. This was one a lot of foster parents apply, but they don't know whether they would qualify or not. And we do a lot of work before we even just do a lightweight evaluation on the front. So one of the teams was helping with that. And then the Think of Us team that was co-hosting and went on to create amazing things. And I grabbed this Twitter post, this tweet that incredible Sister Prejean put up. And I think this is a point we want to make to you guys. We have these amazing technical skills. And so how do we bridge this to not just be singularly kind, but can be systemically kind? Can we really upgrade these systems? Can we techify and collaborate in these much harder places, the social sector, to work in? Let's see, and we don't have your images in here. We put this stuff in here before. So Sixto's team has made amazing work that allows young people to ask for help in setting goals from all kinds of adults around them, almost like crowdsourcing some parenting. Like I could say, hey, can you help me buy a car? Hey, can you help me with my budget? Hey, can you help me just buy some books for school?
And tell me a little bit, obviously this is a very, very successful partnership. Why does this partnership work? Because I think there's a lot of people in this room who have asked for help, and they maybe don't know how to ask the right way. Sometimes people want to give help, but we ask for help in ways that are too cumbersome. Or there's people who want to give help, and then someone calls up and then you say, look, I can't help you that way. You're asking me for something I don't have. Why was this able to work? Sixto, how did you know what Megan can give you? Megan, how did you know to deliver help in a way that Sixto can actually use it and it's not overwhelming? Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I think the first thing is there is practice that's required. When we were in Fast Forward, we met with over 100 different type of executives who you learn real quick how to ask the right questions. But more importantly than that, what my team will tell me all the time, my director of program practice, she's like, solve to the right problem. And so sometimes it's about presenting the issue, the problem, in a little bit of context, and then actually listening. If you're looking for how to solve the problem, how you want this person to solve the problem, which we do sometimes, I'm guilty of it, then you're not going to actually get their authentic buy-in. It's like, you're leading with your question there in your ask.
Right. That's really interesting.
These problems are hard because they're ecosystem problems and they're systemic, right? So lots of different players have to do their thing in new ways. So one of the things that works well here, sorry, bad cough, is that Sixto has people on his team who are technical. And so I think that's a big part of it, is to get into these nonprofits, to have people who have multiple skills, but not having the tech be outside.
Right.
Right, that's a key part of this.
And I think one thing that I also heard you saying is you talked to a lot of people, there were a lot of conversations that didn't click, right? That failure and iteration is part of finding the right mentor, it's finding the right board members, it's finding the people who can help you. Just because you've had 50 meetings and it hasn't worked, that doesn't mean you haven't learned anything from that process.
Yeah, I mean, failure has been critical for us, especially with partnerships going into states, cities, and organizations. You kind of learn real fast that the most complicated part about this is the people. And so part of what that did for us, it gave us really like, what are we looking for in a partner when we're going into a new territory? And so we're glad to be looking at doing some work with First Place for Youth, because we found out they have the right, not only just the right values, the right way of looking at the work, but also the actual, the technical ability to actually look at these problems and value technology as an equal player at the table. It's not an afterthought, it's something that needs to be integrated into your actual leadership meetings.
And
this is a really important point. We sometimes call it TQ, like tech IQ. A lot of times in philanthropy, nonprofit, government, think tanks, tech is considered some other thing. There's certainly IT people, but they're not in your meeting. And so what happens is we might decide on architecture for something or make a plan, but because we don't have that teammate, it's sort of like making a medical decision without having the Surgeon General in the room. Right? So we have our economist, and we do that review. We have our operator, communications, all that, and we left tech out of the room. We were doing that in government all the time. Of course, there's amazing tech in government, NASA and Department of Energy and those groups and the NSA teams. But it wasn't in the elite core, and that's what President Obama was doing with my seat. And what was great in government, I didn't have to know everything that those amazing colleagues knew. I just had to know what I knew. And together, like a Navy SEALs team, we could operate. So maybe the tech is, like the lock picker. But if you don't bring the lock picker, you don't get in the building fast, and you can't execute the mission, right? So how is it that we get this sector to upgrade by letting us have some of these humans in their actual team, so that we can speak these languages faster and move faster within, which is really key. Like every nonprofit, everyone should be using some kind of open data. They should be using APIs. They should be using these platforms, not just social media, which is one part of that and have experts there, but across the board. And so, I want to get behind those kinds of nonprofits that are kind of, let's call it play the whole orchestra. Now, Sixto's team doesn't have only tech people. They have all kinds of people. And what's hard and interesting about these problems is that the teams are full of so much talent, and there's a reason why people sometimes move more slowly, because they know key things that can really break.
That's interesting.
Right? And so you want to work with them, because their knowledge is core to figuring out where you should really go versus breaking it.
And I want to, let me ask actually a question for the audience. How many people in this room consider themselves a technologist? A number of hands, but not that many hands. I wouldn't consider myself a technologist. Even though I actually code with my son. I have every gadget on earth. I can program my home entertainment center, which only took me about 4 or 5 days to figure out. So I'm probably as much of a technologist, but I don't think of myself as a technologist. And I think that's getting at what you're saying, is that when we not only invite technologists to the table, but also embrace that the technologist is more than a technologist. They're also a social scientist. They're also someone who thinks about philanthropy and a colleague. And similarly, that I have the right to talk about APIs, or at least educate myself on what an API ought to be.
Sure.
Yes,
But part of the challenge is that when we start to include tech and data, you're then held to a new it's accountability. And when you think about government and when you think about nonprofits, this whole game of real-time data for real-time results, understanding what accountability looks like, it becomes a different game. Because now you are held accountable not just for these feel-good moments, right? So yes, we got that young person a job, but wait, what does the data say? When you have a platform and you're being tracked, oh, well, 6 weeks after, that young person's not in that job anymore because that young person was at a company where they fluctuate the hours so much, which means that doesn't work for us in foster care. When we age out, we don't got a family to be calling and saying, I'm $100 short for the rent. We're homeless. And so integrating tech and data causes such a level of accountability that I think it actually scares folks because you have to play at a whole different level and actually are accountable for having real results in the young people that you serve.
That's it. Now where are you based at, Sixto?
Richmond, Virginia.
Richmond, Virginia. And you're dealing with a population, foster care has never been, when I think of tech, I don't think foster care is really forward thinking. I don't think about foster care, and this might be unfair, as a community that has been particularly open to learning new ideas. Or talk a little bit about that culture.
I have a theory around that.
Yeah.
I just have a couple images that I want to show you guys really fast, and I won't show, this is one I was going to show before around algorithmic bias. So I'll just pause on this, but this is not related. That's men's lines to women's lines in 2000 films. So the kind of bias that we have in our world is really extreme. We're going to talk about how face recognition is not working on some people of color and these kinds of challenges and how the tech sector is so skewed on who gets to send the agenda. Our amazing colleagues who we love, and there are some other people, right? So let's include everybody into these skills, because there always have been there, and this is how I wanted to answer your question. There have been people working on what you're talking about the whole time. They've been disappeared from history. So this is an image, this is unbelievable. This is the first heart surgery. This baby's life is being saved, and the two doctors doing it, one of them's not allowed to touch the patient. See him back there? Because he's African American. This is outrageous, right? This was not that long ago. So we've been separating incredibly technical, extreme people from really getting the treasure, the money, the funding, and the voice and other things so we can work on all the problems in the world, right? All the problems, not just the ones that certain people are interested in. And this is AI applied to Star Wars movies, right? So there's Carrie Fisher's lines. Now we've got more women's lines. We've got more lines for people of different races. Ada Lovelace is the first programmer in the world, right? She looks like someone we know. But this is the one I wanted to get to. Jane Addams. How many people in here have ever heard of Jane Addams? A couple people, yeah. So Jane Addams won the Nobel Peace Prize for inventing social work. And you don't think of her as a data techie, but guess what? This is her data. This is her data of industrial-age Chicago, measuring the livelihood, the location, where'd you come from. So people were using data to solve social problems. It's just that they're not included as the elite tech crew, but they are. Ecology, Ellen Swallow Richards, first person to start measuring water. Think Flint, right? She cared about would we be healthy from our water and from our food, and she created an entire science that became what the USDA and those things. Ida B. Wells, one of the greatest American data scientists. How many people have heard of her? Yeah, incredible, some people. So she was able to measure the pattern of lynching to teach us and shine the mirror up, hold the mirror up, shine the light of the truth on what we were doing, and she really stopped Americans from lynching in those days using data science. And when it was the Chicago World's Fair time, I'm from Buffalo, I said, right? So Tesla lit Buffalo with Niagara Falls. I mean, we celebrated him in Chicago, and guess what? Ida and Frederick Douglass had to protest the Chicago World's Fair because African-American people were not allowed to exhibit. So this has been going on a long time. We have to figure out, I want you to read this paper because it has Ida stuff. So data science and the fact that Grace can teach the police chief in New Orleans how to code, that the Houston Title I kids in poverty can now work in environmental science and they have 95% graduation rate because they're engaged instead of 50. So sort of this is a whole riff about bringing these kinds of things, sprints, hackathons, capabilities into this other sector. And if we lift the history that's actually been true, that all of us have always been awesome doing all of these things the whole time, I think we can get the confidence to step into our true selves and really apply this stuff the way that Sixto and his team is doing on this particular issue. And it was something we saw in the White House that we were able to slowly transform, and we want to try to IPO this with everybody.
And what's the key to bringing this into the tech community, right? Because the tech community right now doesn't have the greatest reputation for being inclusive or particularly progressive. I mean, when you talk to your former colleagues at Google, when you talk to friends, what's the argument that pushes them over the edge to get them to a place where they say, oh, I want to go find Sixto. I want to work with someone like that?
You know, I'll go ahead and answer that for a bit, and then Megan, you can go. First of all, we have to stop thinking that we are going to be invited and there's any argument that's going to allow space for me to come through. You do not want me at the table sometimes. I'm just going to tell you. It's the truth. We don't want people of color and we do not want women at the table, and yet that is where the impact is coming from. No shade to anyone else. You're doing your thing too. You got a little bit of a head start in terms of privilege. And so, let's be real about it. We're not going to get the right argument for it. It's those of us who really are in service. Part of our service means that we are going to have to fight, and not physically, but we're going to have to fight for our space, and we're going to have to be the ones who advocate so that we make sure that the people that we serve are on the agenda, that are visible, and that's the only way that we actually get to be up in this space.
Yeah, I think, and I know we're almost out of time. I'm going to show a couple more slides really fast because I want to show you something that we're doing. I think there's a couple things. One is the tech sector itself just needs to set the priority much higher and jam. You know, we're able to ship and do things. We're able to do extraordinary things as a tech sector. Let's set the priority in the top 3, 2, 1, something like that, not the top 20. Everybody cares about these issues, but they're not caring enough, so that's diversity. I think in the other side of this, if you guys bring up the slides, I don't know if they're there, I want to show you, like Sixto, are you doing it? Yeah, no.
Yeah, can you guys bring up the slide?
That we were just on the one.
The one you just brought up.
Yeah, okay, so somebody's going ahead. I was going to say, we just went, there's people like all over this country, all over this world who are already solving things. So like Sixto, you know, here's somebody teaching law in prison in Uganda and thousands of people getting themselves out of jail. You know, here's a team flying drones to plant 1 billion trees a year in the UK. People, this is a floating fab lab in the Amazon. Think makerspaces and fab lab and advanced manufacturing in the Amazon, where indigenous people have amazing biology excellence, right? Indigenous. And so what would they invent if they had the power tools that we have here? So kind of it's like techify other spaces and help everybody have all the tools of the orchestra. We noticed in the White House that there were people doing tech meetups in every city, not just Silicon Valley, but Boise, Idaho, everywhere around. So we got them to meet each other and started with Leanne Pittsford, who was just here, who started the Tech Jobs Tour. We've been all over the country getting people connected. So this is Cleveland and speed mentoring, Memphis, speed mentoring. In Oakland, we had 1,000 people show up, just get together. 200 techies showed up to mentor their 800 neighbors into tech. So it's a community organizing thing. This is some of what we're doing with shift7, because we can get people in the country. So I'd say that it's not new. George Washington Carver did this. He trained 2,000 farmers a month in Ag Extension, what became Ag Extension. This is Rise the Rest. Steve Case is out all over the country finding entrepreneurs. And we found this particular group of entrepreneurs in Columbus, Ohio. And they're a modern Jane Addams. They created a settlement house. It's an old school. In the basement, there's an Alice Waters like fresh food restaurant instead of a soup kitchen. In the middle floor, there's a Jen Palka like concierge services for city services. And on the upper floor, there's a Boys and Girls Club for the kids. And this is in the city. We could ship this. And so I'm kind of here to tell all of our colleagues, we are getting this done, and we really need some funding support and teamwork support to really network all of these fabulous entrepreneurs that you guys can act much more like venture catalysts, because you come from this Silicon Valley space. Like the venture capitalists, catalyze these amazing entrepreneurs with us and help them lift. Don't go into this sort of grant mode of having the perfect proposal. Come and get scrappy with us. You know, let's go.
And what that looks like is, you know, we told one funder, fund us milestone to milestone. You know, like if you want a 3-year work plan, we're not the people for you. We're in technology. I can't tell you what things are going to look like in 3 years. 10 years ago, we barely had smartphones. So I think there's a new way that venture philanthropy has to actually engage with folks who are doing this work. You know, get some milestones in there, work to the result.
So the system doesn't make, so if you think about it, Mark Zuckerberg and Jeff Bezos, amazing, you know, Larry Sergey, But they don't make themselves alone. The system creates them. So how do we help Olivia, who's made this awesome game, or Kimura, who made this app up here that listens to the room for domestic violence and asks you if you want to call the police? What if Alexa and Siri could do that, right? So let's get all the 13-year-olds to be able to become the Zuckerberg, Bezos, Gates type crew. And you guys can help us do that, especially in these areas of social and environmental that may not be as economically lucrative, but they still have a business model to them. And all the treasure, all the money that's here could upgrade much faster, and we could accelerate good.
It's enormously inspiring. Thank you both so much for your time, and let's take the message out.